Good evening, everybody. The second video in the educational video series, and it is about some feedback that I had from people that watched the first video, and there were some misunderstandings or some misconceptions in what I have been explaining. I'm going to talk about why the investors are really obsessed with the GDP with examples. I'm going to talk about the COVID and the special case of COVID in some more details. And third, I'm going to shed the light on the 4 stages in the business cycle, and I'm going to go into details in more simplified manner. Let's get started. Why are the investors obsessed with GDP? So let's recap. What is GDP basically? GDP is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C, consumption; I, investment; G, government spending; X, exports; M, imports. Okay, so why the investors are obsessed with it? Let's think about it. Okay, if I'm an investor and I have had an information of like a government spending program that is going to be launched in the near future. Okay, take for example like a train between New York and San Francisco, for example, and it's going to spend like that project is about like 135 billion. So basically this is going to increase the government spending. Think about it. This project at the bare minimum, this project will need hundreds of billions of dollars in steel and hundreds of millions of dollars in workforce, in basically in labor, right? So if this is the case, let's buy or long the steel companies, because the revenues are going to be affected from such project, right? Because they are selling their products with steel to the federal government, which the federal government need to make that project, right? So basically the revenues are increasing. What I mean there, I mean the steel companies, right? Other than that, I can long or buy the companies which basically organize the labor force in the New York or San Francisco, because these companies will need to recruit more workers, and these workers are going to be sent to that kind of project. So basically their revenues are increasing as well, so I'm going to long that, right? Let's take another example. Okay, Mr. Trump and his like the magic idea of tariffs, right? If there is like an exporter in the US, okay, and these tariffs, right, affect foreign governments, right? These foreign governments are going to retaliate on the US companies, right? So in other words, the exports from the US companies, right, their business is going to be decreased abroad, right? Because for example, if I'm buying something from the US for about $140, right, with such tariff from Mr. Trump, my government as a foreigner going to retaliate. So basically if I'm paying now $140 for something, now with the tariff thing I may pay $200, and then I'm going to have a decision of, okay, am I going to buy such product from the US, or I'm going to search for alternatives? Those alternatives could be China, could be Russia, could be, I don't know, Canada, for example, which there is no tariff playing in that thing, and I may actually get my product with $150 as opposed to $200, which is the fucking tariff, right? So this is the thing here. So basically, if I know such thing of the tariffs, as of now, if I have like a stock which is business is exporting, I would sell that stock. I would dump that stock immediately, or on some risk measurement basis, I may short that stock and long another stock in another sector. So, but the end result, I'm going to sell that stock. I'm going to dump this stock. Okay, so this is the first thing with. Okay. Second thing which is COVID. So, okay, Mubarak, let's break down COVID. So COVID is going to affect GDP, right? But okay, what's GDP? C plus I plus G plus X minus M, right? So COVID is going basically to decrease every component of the GDP, right? C is going to be decreased as people not consume more. I is going to be decreased as companies and corporations going to invest less because of slumped demand. Because of COVID, everybody is at home, nobody is buying anything, nobody buys shit, so it's going to be decreased as well. Government, maybe they're not paying more, or like they are, since everybody again at home, government may not spend more. And exports, definitely no one is going to export things because people don't buy things now. So this is actually the effect of COVID. But at the same time, stocks moved up. Like, how's that, right? So GDP moves down, stocks moved up in COVID case. But something which is, there were a huge quantitative easing at COVID. Quantitative easing actually affected the liquidity in the market. So this is really like a special case, okay, in this sense. So in other words, stock prices are more affected by two components: GDP and liquidity. Okay. Lastly, let's talk about the 4 stages in the business cycle. What are the 4 stages in the business cycle? Expansion, peak, contraction, and bottom. Let's talk about expansion first. So expansion, the characteristics of expansion is higher production, right? Lower unemployment, right? Which basically, in other words, you are talking about like demand is increasing on the goods and services on the country. The labor market are now like, it's so strong. People are going to demand higher wages to their jobs, right? Because there are a lot of jobs in the economy, right? Because production basically increases. Everybody is making projects. Everybody wants to hire people, so people are going to demand more wages. Another thing which is in expansion, interest rates are low, so basically credit is very high at that time, so people are spending more and more, which at the same time increases the demand on the goods and services in the country, right? This leads us to the second phase, which is the peak. The peak, generally speaking, the peak comes with inflation. As a result of the 3 things or the 3 effects that I have mentioned, you're talking about like prices will increase. Prices will increase, and you will see it in the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. In other words, inflation increases, okay? So when inflation increases more than the required rate, okay? For example, like when inflation hits like 8%, 10%, 11%, central banks have to, the central bank has to interfere, and it interferes with higher interest rate. Like, and typically at the peak, not only the banks high, like typically there are external shocks and it misses the whole economy, right? And this whole process leads to the 3rd phase, which is contraction, okay? At the contraction, we will reverse everything that I have mentioned in the expansion phase, okay? So basically you're talking about like production decreases, right? Unemployment increases because like there are lower projects in the economy, right? Since there are lower projects, the corporations may not need to hire a lot of people. If people unfortunately are getting fired, right? The labor market or labor are going to demand lower wages, right? Because basically there are a lot of people that want jobs, right? So I'm going to demand lower wages. And since the interest rates are high from the previous previous stage, I'm going to defer my purchase decisions, right? I'm going, if the interest rates, for example, like 16, 17%, I'm not going to buy a fucking home. I'm just going to rent or something, and I'm not going to buy a home with 15%. I'm going to stay like for about like 6 or 7%, 8%. I'm going to buy that home, right? So this is the third stage. This vicious cycle of lower production, lower unemployment, high unemployment, these and like people don't want credit. These three combination, or this combination, leads us to the fourth stage, which is the bottom. Okay, the characteristics of the bottom is that prices hugely decrease, and this is bad. This is really bad for the economy. When prices decrease in unorganized matter, it literally kills the businesses. And we have this instance, for example, in the 1928, in the Great Depression in the US, and you can read about it, but like that's really bad for the economy. Okay, so the result of the three effects that I have mentioned in the contraction phase, prices are decreasing at a higher rate, and then central bank tries to spur or motivate the economy by lowering the interest rate. And this is definitely a turning point in the economy, which is the first phase. That's all for today. Spot anything wrong that I have said, please tell me in the comments. Thank you for watching, and follow for more. See ya.